This is one of the ultimate tension releases in gaming. For the entire game, you're on edge about every little shadow and bump, thinking that a zombie is about to jump out and grab you. While it often does, the game's tension quickly fluctuates between panic and calm because it can regain that scary atmosphere once the zombie is defeated. So how can the game possibly pay off the anticipation that everyone feels as the game nears its end? That sense of dread of having to fight Birkin is still lingering in the player's stomach, and they know that he could pop out from anywhere as he did every time in the past. So when that pivotal moment arrives, and Leon/Claire descends that elevator, ready to face him, it's an admittedly epic moment. It's just always been about survival so far, just making sure to get away from the monsters or to defend yourself from their relentless attacks. So for Leon or Claire to finally take charge and say that they're done running from danger and show how the events of this hellish night have hardened them, it's such an incredible moment, especially since this is a remake. We already know the badasses that they're going to turn into, and it's like watching the birth of the Resident Evil 4 Leon right here. The Birkin boss fight itself is pretty good. It's undoubtedly a climactic fight, as the coloration of his eyes turns a disgusting shade of blood red, and it sells the moment's intensity. It's like he's become a wild creature, and there's no trace of Sherry's father left in him, only the pure destructive instincts of the virus. But it still amounts to a shoot the weak spot boss fight, and I found the earlier battle of using the crane much more scary and thematically appropriate. As I said, it does represent the protagonists stifling their fear, so maybe a more offensive battle was called for here. After the fight, you were expecting the game to end right there, as you've just had the most intense moment of the game. You know you're right at the end, so it doesn't make sense for the game to go quiet again for the final scene, as even if the building is collapsing, video game logic has taught you that it's not going to blow up with you inside, and then that damn countdown starts. By putting the countdown as part of the UI, Capcom is communicating to the player that they aren't messing around, and they will die if they don't escape in time. This jolts the player into a sense of hyper-awareness and stress, which is piled on top of the tiredness they just felt after putting down the most formidable enemy in the game. People might argue that having the player escape from an exploding building is far more action than horror, and they'd be right if not for the countdown. When Nathan Drake is running from a collapsing structure in Uncharted, you know you're not in any real danger, because the game is generous with checkpoints, but in Resident Evil 2, you'll have to go all the way back to the typewriter if you mess up. By putting the player in tangible danger of failing, and enacting a not brutal but significant punishment for failure, this action set piece becomes highly tense and climactic, especially since you don't know how much longer you have to go. When you had to do an escape sequence in Metroid or Pizza Tower, you at least know the area you have to go back through to be safe. You can picture how much time you need to escape, and this removes a little bit of stress as you can plan the journey in your head. But in Resident Evil 2, you have no idea how much longer you have to go to escape the lab, because it's not just the lab you have to leave. You need to get far enough away on a train so that the explosion doesn't kill you. That sense of uncertainty is always the main fear factor in horror, and when it's cranked up to its high intensity, it's a glorious feeling of panic. And just as you do your mad dash to the finish, and you think you have plenty of time to spare, that's when the true final boss appears, and the true horror of the timer commences now. This boss is different depending on which character you're playing as, and one is more satisfying than the other. With Birkin, you just had your epic fight, and it feels like that whole fight was a waste of time if he can immediately get back up again and start attacking for one true final battle. Even if you kill him here, he just returns for one final attack on the train, and at this point it's just comedically stupid how resilient he is, as it's just done because the plot calls for a monster. But with Leon, the final fight is against Mr. X, and while this is also a case of a creature that just won't die, Mr. X is a far more omnipresent threat than Birkin. For most of the game, he's haunted your every move, chasing you, trying to corner and kill you. While the Birkins may be the main antagonists of the story, Mr. X is the main enemy you fought across the whole game, relentlessly pursuing you across the map, causing you significant frustration and fear as you try to avoid him. So to be confronted with this thought-to-be unkillable monster is the ultimate culmination of the game. This leads to the orgasmically therapeutic moment of blowing him to pieces with a rocket launcher and overcoming this endorphin rush of an ending, finally putting this incredible nightmare behind you. I'll be back in 2 days. In the meantime, here's a video about how Resident Evil 4 has the best zombies of all time, and yes, they do count as zombies.